My original plan was to explain the gist of the situation before launching into my text records, but it's better if you see for yourself. I'd rather not think too much about the events that follow, so I'll just give a brief introduction. My name is Donald, a 22-year-old student looking to get a Ph.D. in analytical chemistry. Some weeks ago, my sister was hospitalized for illness, some pulmonary disease that I can't remember, after she was out in the rain for a few hours. Her health was never good, but her heart always was. In the selfless manner typical to Linda, she was trying to find someone else's lost bird. I honestly thought it'd be impossible, but she found it in the end. I was busy with classes and research, and for whatever reason, the hospital restricted visiting hours to Tuesdays and Sundays, 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. I rarely had the chance to visit, so we kept in contact largely through text instead. The following is my record of our conversations. Mon, Oct 7th, 2:31 a.m. Emmy, I heard you were hospitalized. What the hell happened? Linda, I just got sick. Started coughing real violently in class. LOL. It prob sounds mild, but it was red bad. Linda, real bad. Huh. Emmy, did the doctors tell you what was wrong? What's going to happen now? Linda, pulmonary edema or something. I think that was it. Linda, also no idea. I'll probably be here for a while. Emmy, I'll visit you when I get the chance. Linda, Tuesdays and Sundays only, 104. Tomorrow's Tuesday, though, wed, Oct 9th, 3:31 p.m. Emmy, everything still fine? Linda, yeah, I think so. Some weird stuff happened today, but I think it's fine. Are you done for the day? Emmy, I'm done with classes. I'll probably be at my office for a little bit longer. What weird stuff? Linda, I got this weird feeling in my chest and stomach. It's a kind of burning, aching feeling, and it comes with some anxiety too. Emmy, did you tell the doctors about this? Linda, yeah, I did. They did some tests, but if they figured out what was wrong, they didn't tell me. Emmy, let them know if it gets any worse. Let me know, too. Linda, cake, 2, Oct 10th, 3:10 a.m. Linda, the walls are bleeding. Linda, what is happening? Linda, are you awake? Linda, I've called 5 times already. Pick up the phone. Oh, Linda, wake up. Linda, it's the fire. That's what the feeling is. Linda, the blood is soaking the sheets and flooding the fitting room. 2, Oct 10th, 6:49 a.m. Emmy, what happened? Are you okay? Respond ASAP. Emmy, I'm coming to the hospital. Linda, I'm fine now. I think I was hallucinating or something. I already told the doctors about it. You can't visit on Thursdays anyways. Linda, they asked some questions but didn't come to a conclusion yet. Dr. Lykos said he'd keep the conversation going with me to figure out what's wrong. Linda, I guess there are some psychiatric issues too. Emmy, all right, if you're sure. Emmy, that's concerning. Wasn't this a normal physical condition? Linda, apparently not. I'd, Emmy, Lemk, if anything else happens. 2, Oct 10th, 4:54 p.m. Emmy, come to think of it, what do you mean by the fire? Linda, what? What? Emmy, you said the feeling you had was the fire. What did you mean? Emmy, are the hallucinations also affecting your reasoning? Linda, I don't know. It just felt right. I thought of the word, and it just clicked. Emmy, okay. 2, Oct 10th, 8:02 p.m. Linda, you free earn? Emmy, yeah, what's up? Linda, I think the hallucinations are getting worse. Emmy, you let the doctors know? 2, Oct 10th, 8:27 p.m. Linda, yeah, they're aware. Still don't know what's wrong. Linda, can I talk to you about what I'm seeing? Emmy, yeah, if you think it'll help. Linda, there are a few minor things, like sometimes I'll see something moving in the corner of my eyes. Linda, but when I'm taking a walk around the hospital, sometimes that weird fire feeling comes back, and the whole place turns into an impossible nightmare. Linda, I'll turn a corner and end up somewhere I know wasn't around that corner, and I'll go through doors and end up back where I was in sewer. Linda, And sometimes the hallways go on for too long. Linda. And there's no one around. M.E. As in, you're forgetting bits of memory, not knowing how you ended up somewhere. Linda. No. I mean literally turning a corner and seeing it lead to a different part of the hospital, or maybe a part that doesn't exist. Linda. Or opening a door and seeing the doorway lead to a place it couldn't possibly lead to. M.E. How many closed doors are there at the hospital where you can walk? Aren't there rules against that kind of stuff? Linda. Yeah, usually the big doors in the hallways are open so people can move beds and stuff. But when this happens, the doors are always closed for some reason. Linda, I can't even turn back. I'll turn around and see somewhere I didn't walk from. Linda. I sometimes manage to get back to my room after a while, but I have to check if everything's the same. Is this really my room, etc. sort of thing, you know. M.E. I think you shouldn't take walks if you feel unsafe while doing so. Linda, probably not, yeah. Linda, there's a woman too. I don't recognize her. Black hair and really pale skin, but it doesn't look unhealthy somehow. She sometimes shows up when this happens. Linda, I'll open a door and she's right there. Then I'll turn back and go down a few hallways and turn a corner, and she's right there. If I get to my room, I'll check everything. And when I'm done checking a corner, I'll turn around and she's right there. Linda, she never says anything, never moves. Whenever I see her though, I can't help but panic. There's something wrong with her. M.E., that's creepy AF. Are you okay? Linda, yeah, she never does anything. I told Dr. Likos about her, so he knows. He says it's just another hallucination, but if it gets bad, I can get one of the nurses to come over. Linda, but I can't. The staff disappears, remember? M.E., I'm not sure what to think. You shouldn't be in any danger from hallucinations, but that's not the point. M.E., do you think I can convince them to let me stay the night with you? Sleep on a chair or something? Would that help? Linda, I can ask. Thu, Oct 10th, 19 p.m. Linda, yeah, that's a no. They said I need quiet and rest to heal, or whatever. M.E., I'm not going to make any noise. Linda, I told them that. They don't believe you, since there are a lot of patients you could disrupt here. M.E., that doesn't feel right. You can call or text whenever you need to. I'll monitor my phone and leave class if needed. I'll make sure it's not silenced when I sleep too. Linda, thanks. M.E., yeah, Nemp. Fry, Oct 11th, 7:00 a.m. Linda, she's in the fucking mirror. Linda, she's in the mirror. What the actual hell? What do I do? M.E., what do you mean? Linda, I went to the bathroom to wash and she's in the reflection behind me and just staring at me. Linda, only in the reflection too. Linda. And when I turned around to look and saw that she wasn't there, I looked back at the mirror and she had moved closer. Linda, she's coming. Donald, she's coming for me. M.E., fuck their visiting hours. I'm on my way. Fry, Oct 11th, 10:34 p.m. Linda, thanks for spending the day here. It looks like the hallucinations don't happen when you're around. M.E., yeah, anytime. It's a good thing the staff let me stay. Lemk, if anything else happens, and I'll come over again. Linda, thanks. Sat, Oct 12th, 9:45 a.m. Linda, when you're not here, she's always in the mirror now. Every mirror, too. How the hell am I supposed to shower or brush my teeth if there's a mirror in my bathroom? In every bathroom? M.E., that's really concerning. Can you ask the nurses to cover up the mirror, maybe? They might understand. Linda, I'll try. Sat, Oct 12th, 9:59 a.m. Linda, they actually said yes. They covered the mirror with a taped-on curtain. The charge nurse said I wasn't in any danger, but she covered it up anyways. M.E., wow, it's a good thing the staff is so understanding. Linda, Eker, Sat, Oct 12th, 1:13 p.m. Linda, why the fake is this happening? She was on the stairs. Linda, I've recovered enough that they let me walk wherever without support or being hooked up to anything. So I decided to go downstairs for some fresh air, and I went down one floor and saw her at the foot of the stairs. Linda, she was just waiting for me. M.E., would it help if you asked someone to accompany you on your walks? I can do it when I'm there, but is there anyone else in the meantime? M.E., Any volunteers or interns or anyone else without anything really important to do? Linda, I guess. There's usually a volunteer staffing the unit desk, answering the phone and monitoring patients on telemetry. I'll ask if he can come with me. Emmy, I'll be over tomorrow. Do that in the meantime. Mon, Oct 14th, 5:26 p.m. Linda, it didn't work. Linda. I thought it did at first on Saturday, but it didn't work today. I turned my head and he just vanished. Linda. And of fucking course there she was right beside me where he was supposed to be. She's getting closer. Linda. She has horrible stained teeth, like she's been eating rotten, decayed flesh. Linda. I ran until I couldn't run anymore. The halls seemed to go on forever. I went through one of the doors and somehow ended up on the roof. Linda. I was ready to jump, but she didn't show up. I stayed up there for an hour before the volunteer showed up. He said I just took off running, and he'd been searching for me. Emmy, you were ready to jump? Emmy, Linda, she's not real. The only way she can put you in danger is by making you put yourself in danger. Don't let that happen. Emmy, contact someone immediately if it ever comes to something like this. Linda, I know she can't be real, but that doesn't make her any less real in the moment. Emmy, I know, but you're stronger than this. Be brave. Linda, okay. 2 Oct 15th, 10:40 a.m. Linda, Donald, she's coming to judge me. Linda, it's because I'm a sinner and she's coming to judge me for my sins. Emmy, what? What's happening? She's a hallucination, right? You still know that? Linda, the fire feeling. That was her spark, her little portion of the fire. She was tracking me down, and she's coming to judge me just as she comes for other sinners. Linda, and for what sin? I demanded too much of others, asked for too much from our parents, from the staff here, and from you. Linda, this whole illness too. I brought it on myself and troubled everyone because of it. That was my sin. Emmy, Linda, calm down. Can you do that? Do that finger tracing exercise Dr. Lykos taught you. And remember that she isn't real. Linda, the others too. She comes to judge them. Linda, that volunteer. He wasn't there when his mother needed him, and she died because of that. The woman comes to judge him too. Linda, and the patient in the next room over. He's in a relationship with his best friend, who is also a man. Linda, why is that even a sin? Love is love, right? There's nothing wrong with that. Linda, but we humans don't get to choose. We have no authority. What we think is fair or right or good means nothing. We don't get to choose what sin is or isn't. Linda, the fire is what chooses. And it hates us. It hates us because it's forced to be with us. Emmy, I'm coming over. Can you sit down and breathe while I'm on my way? Linda, the doctors too. Dr. Leipzig worked overtime too much and passed out in the staff lounge for a few minutes. Dr. Lykos had too many patients needing things at once, and he had no choice but to handle them one at a time. Linda, those are sins too. Sometimes people have no choice but to sin, but the fire doesn't care. She comes to judge them. Linda, the nurse, Sarah, her father abused her as a child, so she didn't attend his funeral. The woman comes to judge her for that. Linda, Bruce, another nurse. He got confused by some convoluted details and gave food to a patient before checking their blood sugar. They lost one measurement. The patient's blood sugar hadn't been at any remotely dangerous levels for a week now, too. Linda, but he sinned. She comes to judge him. Emmy, I just got to the parking lot. I'm on my way. Hung in there. That day I got out of the car and walked into a slaughterhouse with a hospital exterior. Everyone within the building had been violently butchered. There were a few signs of struggle, overturned chairs and tables, trails of blood leading to the bodies of those who tried to escape, and other things like that. But no one survived. The wounds were horrific too. They mostly consisted of slash wounds, but the wounds weren't deep. If the killer was wielding a knife, it would have been a short one. Invariably though, each wound was accompanied by huge blunt force trauma. A cut from the neck upwards would lead to a shattered skull. A stab to the chest would be joined by broken ribs and a sternum pulverized to dust. I walked through that carnage in a daze, unable to process what I was seeing. It was as if my body knew to numb my mind, because if I were in full possession of my consciousness, I would have broken right then and there. Keep going, it seemed to say. You need to keep going. Some days, I wish I hadn't listened to that voice. I found Linda a few feet away from her room door. Her spine had been snapped in half, as if someone had folded her backwards like a sheet of paper. Her eyes and mouth were sewn shut, and a mangled stab wound was all I could see of her neck. The police cordoned off the area when they arrived, but no evidence of the killer was left. Even the security cameras were useless immediately before the massacre began. Each camera had been melted by some immense source of heat. The police asked me several questions, but I don't remember any of them. The only clear part of that ephemeral dream left in my memory is the sight of Linda's face, mutilated unlike any other for some incomprehensible reason. Ever since that day, I haven't been able to focus on anything. Daytime is marred by scattered flashbacks, and nighttime is nothing but a chain of night terrors. Even so, I need to continue, because the police aren't getting anywhere. If anyone reading this has anything helpful to say, please let me know, no matter how suicidal it may be. I need to find this woman. I worked the graveyard shift as a security guard for a hospital, and do I have some stories to tell? First, let me fill you in on the general layout of the campus. The main building is divided into two parts. The first part consists of a ground-level emergency department, an operating room on the first floor, and a child birthing center on the second floor. And the second part holds the patient units. There are 7 floors here, and each wing is used by various patient classes: cardiac, behavioral, pediatric, etc. Apart from the main building is the McCam building, which is a historic structure that used to serve as a nursing school back in the late 1800s. It was a rectangular square building that was used partially for classes, partially for dormitories. Presently, it is used as an office space for handling management needs and things of the sort. It is only open during the day, unlike the rest of the hospital, which operates 24/7. My main duty as a security guard is to handle disorderly patients who are usually having psychotic breakdowns or high on drugs, and to patrol the premises and make sure nothing is out of the ordinary. The exterior of the campus can get a little creepy at night, and my eyes are always peeled for wild animals, especially coyotes. Truth be told, I'd rather spend my entire shift outside with the coyotes than spend 5 minutes inside McCam. I have to check it at least once a night, and I always make sure to bring my coworker with me. We hurriedly scan the building's 4 floors and move on without a second glance. We both agree that the place gives us the creeps. The hospital staff like to chatter about how hospitals are haunted places. It's reasonable. There's at least 1 death per day at the hospital I work at. This presumption, coupled with a tired mind, can give one the impression of spotting a ghost as it makes its journey to the other side. I've never seen anything remotely paranormal during my shift, let alone my life. My coworker swears he's seen unexplained shadows move out of the corners of his eyes. Our perspectives changed the night we decided to play the stupidest game ever. I was sitting in my office with my coworker, Frank, shooting the shit. Our office was located just outside the emergency department, where we directed lost family members to the rooms of their respective relatives. On this particular night, a mutual buddy of ours, Mark, popped his head in. Mark was obsessed with ghosts, and the topic inevitably made its way into our conversation. "You guys ever see anything when you go through McCam?" he began. We both shook our heads. "You know that's the most haunted place, right?" I rolled my eyes. "Mark, not this again." "It's true. You know that it used to be a nursing school. Well, apparently it was a wicked tough one. Exams were brutal. They were so brutal that nursing students began to kill themselves because they were afraid of failing out." "That's dumb," I said. "There was this one group of nursing students, it was around 1910, I can't remember the exact year, but they were so scared of failing their exam that they made a suicide pact. They all jumped from the roof and killed themselves right in front of the entrance." I looked at him, dumbfounded. "Seriously, that's a load of crap." Mark regarded me with wide eyes. "You don't believe me?" "Not one bit. Do you know the glass cabinet with the creepy dolls? On the ground floor, I knew exactly what he was talking about. Near the main entrance, there's a glass cabinet that displays 5 homemade dolls that are dressed up as nurses. They stood 14 inches tall and wore those old school nursing outfits, you know, with the red crosses. I never gave them further inspection because there was something unsettling about them. There have been problems of hooligans stealing them in the past, but never on my watch. They were indeed creepy, watching me as I did my rounds through McCam. Well, they say that the souls of those nurses became trapped in the dolls. 5 students, 5 dolls. They say that if you go to the 3rd floor, stand outside room 333, and knock on it 3 times so the 3rd strike lands just as the clock turns 3:33. The dolls will play hide and seek with you. I laughed out loud at this. Mark shifted uncomfortably. I looked over at Frank, who was also silent. Come on, Frank, you can't actually be buying this. I heard about it too, Frank mumbled. I don't know how the 2 of them convinced me to try out this foolish experiment. It was obviously a ghost story fabricated by some bored staff member who wanted to get a rise out of his coworkers. But before I knew it, I was standing outside of room 333 in the McCam building with Frank and Mark. It was 3:32 in the morning, and I felt like a fool. Well, here goes nothing, I said as I rapped on the wooden door 3 times. The sound echoed through the dark hallway and faded away. I checked my watch. It was 3:33. We waited in silence for a few moments. I braced myself for something, but nothing came. Come on, let's go. I heard a door close downstairs and I nearly jumped out my skin. I looked at the other 2, who were equally as shaken. I grabbed Mark firmly by the shoulders. Are you fucking with us? I hissed. Is someone pulling a prank on us? Mark violently shook his head. I could see the terror in his eyes as my flashlight illuminated his face. We need to check it out. Could be a trespasser, I hope. We slowly descended to the 1st floor. As we came into the hallway, I wondered how frightened we looked. I led the way with Frank close behind me, while Mark was literally glued to his ass. We probably resembled some demented version of the mystery gang. I flashed my light on all the doors. None were open. My light came to the cabinet and my heart leapt into my throat. Yup, they were gone. We're fucked now, boys, Mark said softly, and crossed himself. I turned to him. Mark, I swear to God, if you're pulling a fast one on us, I'll throw you off the roof myself. When I said these words, a chill swept through me. The temperature must have suddenly dropped 10 degrees and I shivered. The air itself almost felt depressed. A whisper drifted through my ear. It started. We have to find them, or something bad will happen. It was Frank. Can't you feel it? The negative energy. I could. I motioned toward the nearest door. Come on, I said. We crept around the 1st floor, opening each door with great anticipation, not knowing what was in store for us. To my relief, the floor was empty. There was still no sign of the dolls. We gathered in the hallway and were about to make our way up to the 2nd floor when we heard a slight patter above us. It sounded like 3 or 4 children were running around overhead. Pit-pat down the hallway toward us. A pause, then pit-pat in the opposite direction. This happened 3 times. Then it stopped. Shit, I thought to myself. Oh fuck, that. Mark whimpered and turned toward the door. My hand shot out and found his elbow. Don't be a pussy. We're in this together. I could see Mark's face glistening with sweat and his eyes wide with terror. We climbed the stairway with great caution. We clung to each other in fear, savoring each breath as if it were our last. When we came to the hallway, we were greeted by the slight tinkling of bells. The source was coming from the far end of the hallway. I shone my light into the darkness. Nothing. The faint tinkle warmly greeted us. I wanted to turn and run, but something was drawing me in. I slowly led the group toward the sound. I reached one of the doors and stopped. I motioned to my ear and pointed beyond the door. The other 2 nodded. I gripped the doorknob and slowly let myself in. On the other side of the door was a bathroom. It was one of those old dormitory bathrooms with a rounded sink in the middle and undivided latrines on both sides. In the porcelain sink were 3 dolls. I cautiously approached them and slowly extended my hand, as if the merest touch would set my hand on fire. I picked one up. It wore a white nurse's dress with a red cross on the right breast. On its head was a white cap with another red cross. Its black hair fell over its face, covering the features. I swept its hair back to reveal a faded, smiling face. Its porcelain skin was icy cool to the touch. I shuddered. We each returned a doll to the cabinet. 2 to go, I told myself. Mark and Frank were silent, exhausted from the terror of the night. I was relieved that they were with me. If I had to do this by myself, I think I'd have lost my mind. Do you think we have to split up? Whispered Frank. Cover more ground that way. I wheeled around and faced him. No, don't you watch horror movies. No matter what happens, we cannot split up. If the entity is malevolent, it'll kill us when we're alone. If anything, we should tie a rope around us so we don't get separated. My logic trumped their fearful state. Besides, I felt much better with Frank and Mark close by. Glued at the hip, we went to the third floor and inspected it thoroughly. We couldn't find any dolls, and I kept my ears pricked for any noises. When the third floor seemed safe, we climbed to the fourth floor. While in the stairwell, the sound of running footsteps greeted us. We must be getting close to another one. As we stepped into the hallway, the footsteps faded and we watched a door slam shut, making all three of us jump in unison. What came next made my balls crawl up into my body. You know that cheesy child's laugh in Roller Coaster Tycoon? The one you hear over and over again, which makes you want to punch that kid in the face. Well, hearing that same laugh now filled me not with frustration but terror. Raw, uncensored terror. To my left, Mark was praying. Frank remained as stoic as ever. Together, we inched our way toward the door that had closed moments before. I braced myself and opened it, expecting the worst. Nothing came, and I looked inside. The room was empty, save for a ladder that disappeared into a hole in the ceiling. The night sky greeted us. Of course, they would hide on the roof. After a quick game of rock, paper, scissors, Frank climbed the ladder first, with me close behind. We stepped onto a small stone patio from the roof of the McCam building. The main part of the hospital looked inviting. I caught myself wishing that I was in my office and not playing this stupid game. Look, there Frank pointed to a small figure in the corner of the patio. The doll was propped up against the stone railing that overlooked the main entrance. I picked the doll up and looked over the railing. It didn't look so high from here. I wondered if I leapt from here I'd survive. I grasped the railing and began to hoist myself up when Frank called out, "Hey, what are you doing?" I froze. What the hell was I doing? A spell of vertigo gripped me as I backed away from the railing. Did I seriously just consider jumping off? I shook it off. "Come on," I said sullenly. "Let's go find that last doll." We searched McCam for what seemed like hours. We thoroughly swept through the 4 floors twice without any luck. I was starting to feel more irritated than annoyed. The strangest part was that there were no more weird noises. I started to question if there were only 4 dolls to begin with. If there was a 5th doll, we would have had to start tearing up the floorboards to find it. Our search for the 5th doll came to an anticlimactic conclusion when the sun's rays made their way into the hallway, filling it with a hulse. A wave of relief rushed through me, but in the back of my mind I still regretted that we never found that last doll, if it ever existed. I couldn't understand why the charge nurse gave me such a strange look when I said I was going into room 14 to take a nap on my break. It wasn't unusual for us to occasionally roll a stretcher into one of the rooms to sleep for an hour or so during break on a night shift. We work 12 hours straight and just take one long break in the middle so we can actually get a decent nap in, I guess. "If you want to," she said, her brow furrowed. "Oh, Sharon, he's new." "He doesn't know about it, Jody," another nurse said cryptically. Sharon, the charge nurse, turned and looked at her. "Ah, you're right. I guess nobody's told you yet," she said, turning back to me. "What? What's the deal with room 14 now?" I was curious. It was the only room on the floor we had available. Everybody else was already sound asleep in their assigned sleeping cubbies, conference rooms, storage rooms, you name it. We'd roll a stretcher in there and nap our brains out. "Well, everybody who works here knows it's haunted," Sharon said. I thought she was kidding. Obviously. Serious people don't believe in ghosts. People like Sharon, who was as sensible as they come, definitely didn't believe in ghosts. Seriously, I chuckled. I didn't believe in ghosts at all. I knew everything that people claimed had some rational explanation. I had seen a documentary about it once. It was fascinating how people came up with things in their minds and would remember them later and elaborate on them, making them more fantastic, adding characters like ghosts to make them seem more exciting. All a bunch of pathological liars, like the people who claim to be abducted by UFOs, or so I thought. "You guys believe in that stuff?" They both looked at each other, sending psychic messages back and forth. I had only been working there for a bit, so I hadn't developed that particular talent yet. Also, I didn't know the one thing all new nurses should know. Listen to the people who have been doing it longer than you were. They almost always know better than you do, especially when you're really new, which I was. I mean, if you don't believe us, you can give it a shot. Guys, no, seriously. "That's not okay," the voice in the corner chimed in. Liang, a guy who had also worked there for a while. "You really should not sleep in there. Jason, it's not a good place to sleep." I usually trusted Liang, so I was a bit disappointed he was joining in on this apparent prank on the newbie to the floor. Maybe they just wanted to sleep in there themselves, so they were just psyching me out, I thought. "Okay guys, I get it. I'm the new guy, but seriously, I think I'll be okay. I'm really not worried." Liang tried again to convince me, but I blew him off, thinking he was taking the joke too far. Sharon and Jody had given up and were sitting there silently, waiting to see what would happen. I laughed self-consciously and went to the clean supply room to grab some blankets and brought them into the room. It was a semi-private room with 2 beds. They were both clean, so I figured I would just change the sheets when I was done and forget about rearranging the room to pull in a stretcher. This would be easier, and I was dead tired. I turned off the lights and lay down in the bed closest to the door. The room was silent and dark. I let my mind drift off to sleep. I had a terrible dream. I dreamt that someone was standing over me, watching me sleep. I knew exactly where I was and felt awake, but really I was still asleep. I tried to lift my arms, but found they wouldn't move. I felt paralyzed and filled with dread as I tried to look up but couldn't. I could only see a dark, vague outline of something large and malevolent. I heard the thing speaking angrily, and it began to shout, but I couldn't understand its words. My heart began to race as I realized this thing wanted me out. I tried to stand up but found I couldn't. I began to panic and thrash about in the bed, finally mercifully waking up. I realized I had been asleep and had dreamt the whole thing. The whole thing had been a product of my overworked, overstressed mind. But why, then, did I still feel such panic and utter dread? It felt as if I could die at any moment. The room was silent and dark for a few more moments. Then I heard someone clear their throat next to me in the pitch-black room. I felt a chill run down my spine and goosebumps spread across my entire body. The curtain beside me had been pulled across while I was asleep, separating me from the bed next to me. I wanted to believe it was another nurse that had come in and closed the curtain so they could sleep in the other bed, but I knew that wasn't it. I could already tell something was wrong. I had to see. I pulled out my flashlight and looked beside me, terrified. Nothing at first, and then I saw a hand, gnarled and bleeding, green and black and rotten, pull back the curtain from beside me. The face that stared back at me from the second bed was not human. It was something evil, something which had gotten in here which was not supposed to be here at all. It was an abomination, a terrible, wrong thing in a place that should be meant for peace and healing. I screamed so loud I woke up the entire floor of sleeping patients. I ran from the room, falling over and bruising my hip badly in the process, getting tangled up in the laundry bin near the doorway. I fled and left the hospital entirely. I've never gone back. I can't bear to be in the same building with that thing. Now that I know it's there, I can never be in that hospital again. I could certainly never be a patient there. The patients would always tell us they had trouble sleeping in that room. I would call up the doctor and ask for some melatonin or some Zopiclone, maybe a lorazepam if it came down to it. But now I understand the real reason why no one could ever sleep in room 14. Hi, I'm a 32-year-old woman and a phlebotomist at a rural hospital. In case you're unfamiliar with phlebotomy, I'm someone who takes blood from patients and prepares it for various kinds of testing. Last year, I encountered an issue with a patient that I've never seen before or since. It's been hard to get off my mind, and I hope writing about it will help. I guess this is also a last-ditch effort in hoping that someone will believe me and help me understand what happened. I've worked at this hospital for 4 years after spending the previous 4 at a nursing home. I had a bit of a rough upbringing mixed with some drug use, actually part of what got me into this line of work. As I mentioned, my current hospital is deeply rural. There are about 15 miles of woods right out back. I used to spend my smoke breaks out there before all of this. I encountered this patient on the graveyard shift, also known as the overnight. I'm rarely booked on those, as phlebotomy is considered the less urgent sector of the hospital that usually doesn't require late nights. But we were lighter than usual on nurses back then. I was just sitting down when the CNO told me that we needed a draw in a 145. I remember feeling annoyed as I made my way towards the back of the hospital. Whoever had done their intake had put this patient at the very end of the hall, with about 20 empty rooms between them and our other bookings that night. It was off the round structure. A 145 was the only room with light under the door. I did my usual knock, an announcement before walking in. This part was all captured in the hallway monitor, which I checked the next day. The moment I walked in, I nearly fell backward. A man had pulled the chair from the far corner of the room, near the window, right up to the doorway. He was sitting and facing the entrance and sprung to his feet the moment I walked in. A boy was lying on the bed behind him, and I could feel a breeze coming from outside. I distinctly remember that the man had on a ball cap that read Louisville in faded letters, and big black sunglasses that contrasted his sallow, droopy skin. He was wearing a shirt that also read Louisville, and he stepped back as I stepped forward, pushing the chair behind him with a scrape. "I didn't mean to scare you," he said, quickly, shaking his head back and forth. I remember just laughing in response and telling him it was fine, that I was just used to the chair being in the corner. I turned for the patient chart tucked in the clipboard holder and found it missing. When I turned back, the man was holding it out for me and told me that he'd just finished filling it out. I took it with a nod, scanning the details, then walking over to the boy. It had been filled in with sloppy handwriting. I don't remember all the specifics of how I interacted with the boy, but I know I must have followed my usual procedures before a draw. I smiled down at him, and he stared up at me with watery green eyes. He looked 12, the age his chart read. "Hi there, Lewis," I remember saying, glancing for his name. I asked him how he felt today. The boy looked at the man, then back to me. I heard the scrape of the chair being pulled closer to the bed behind me. "I feel fine, but my father and I want to make sure that I'm all normal. So we came to try this at that point." The father had his hands on the foot of the bed and was leaning forward, staring from beneath the thick sunglasses. "Of course, Lewis, well, I'm going to check that out by borrowing a little blood from you, if that's all right. It really won't hurt at all." That is roughly what I responded. Suddenly, the man piped up, speaking quickly and loudly so that both Lewis and I turned to him. "It won't hurt at all," the boy nodded in response and seemed to repeat it to himself. I felt myself begin to grow uneasy at the father's mannerisms as I made my way across the room to the medical cabinet. This unease was compounded by a gust from the open window, which chilled me in my scrubs. As I looked out the open window, I could see the tree line not too far away, and the branches swaying and clawing against the night sky. I remember that very distinctly. We never kept the windows open, so I moved to close it. As my hand stretched out, I could see the man standing stiffly behind me in the reflection from the glass. "Please, leave it open," he cooed. "We get very hot." I was tired, and the man was standing very close to me, so I acquiesced, turning back to the medical cabinet and opening it for my supplies. I grabbed what I needed and placed it on the sink counter, washing my hands as I routinely did and slipping on my gloves. I know that all the equipment I took was standard: butterfly needles, Vacutainer collection tubes, gauze, tourniquet, everything you'd expect. There was nothing faulty about the materials. I know that isn't what happened here. I walked up to the left side of the bed and asked Lewis to sit up nice and straight. Normally I prefer using a nice cushiony chair, but those are a bit down the hall, and we're already comfortable in bed, is what I told him. Stupidly, instead of taking him to the draw room, I remember things more vividly from here. I placed the collection tubes and needle down on the small table nearby and applied the tourniquet around his mid-bicep. He stared solemnly up at the ceiling as I began to thumb the crook of his arm for the vein. That's when I first knew something was wrong. As I stared down at the boy's arm and felt around with my fingers, I couldn't find the tracings of his veins anywhere. I pressed my thumb harder, squinting as if it would make the blue streaks appear beneath his skin. After nearly a minute, I started to feel confused. I smiled up at the boy, whose eyes held the same watery stare. I decided I'd best try my luck with a puncture. I drew my tools, wiping the crook of his arm with alcohol and aiming the needle in the same place I always did. I was hoping I was just tired. As I dug the needle in, I hoped for the momentary resistance and then gentle pop that accompanied the finding of a vein, but none came. "I'm sorry, I'm going to need to try again," I said, softly. It was what I always remark when I can't find the vein, though I rarely need to. I slid out the needle slowly, pressing a square of gauze against the area before repuncturing. Again, I felt nothing. As this process continued for 6 failed puncture attempts, I began to notice a few things. The first, which I realized as I pushed in the needle for the 3rd time, my teeth gritted, was that the boy did not seem pained at any moment. It was like putting an IV drip in an unconscious person. The second thing I noticed, while I withdrew the needle for the 5th time, was that the gauze I was pressing against the venipuncture sites was clean. I turned the white pad back to me and didn't see a single drop of red. As I looked at his arm, I could see the holes I'd made, but no spotting of blood. The 3rd thing I noticed, after my 6th attempt was unsuccessful, was how close the man had gotten to me while I was trying to draw his son's blood. He was seated on the other side of a rather wide hospital bed, but he was stretching across it, leaning on his hands and crooning his neck, his face only a foot from mine. I almost dropped the needle when I saw him, and it unnerved me even more than Lewis's seeming lack of veins. "Something is wrong," the man breathed, and I moved my chair back to create some distance. I put down the needle and stood up, Moving towards the foot of the bed, the man paralleled my movements, shooting up from his seat and standing in front of me with a few long strides. The man spoke in a hushed voice from beneath his cap and glasses. "Please tell me what's wrong." He sounded nervous, in a genuine way, but it did nothing to reduce my unease. I whispered back, "I'm sorry, I just haven't seen this before. I'm searching for a vein to draw from, and I just can't find one." The man paused, his hands fidgeting. "What do you mean, exactly?" I let out a confused laugh, mostly out of discomfort. I remember wondering if there was a language barrier. "I mean, I can't find the vein," as in the blue tubes filled with blood in his arm. "I've never been unable to locate them like this. It's not normal," the man muttered, seeming to cock his head to the window behind me. "It's okay. I'll talk to him. He's just nervous." I shook my head back and forth, confused. I don't think he's nervous. In fact, most kids are a little scared of the pain, but Louis doesn't even seem to notice it. I'm worried something is wrong with him. Maybe some kind of hypovolemia. His skin feels almost rubbery. The man began to shake his head back and forth, as if he were mimicking my motion. No. Pain and veins. He's all right. I will speak with him for just a second, and then you'll check again." The man was wringing his hands together now. The skin on them, like on his face, looked too wrinkled for his age. The man spun back towards the boy and took 3 long strides until he was at his side, muttering something. I looked over to the door and pictured the long stretch of hallway between myself and the rest of the people in the hospital. I considered who had done intake for the 2 of them, and if the man would even know what I meant if I asked for his insurance. I looked back out the window and wondered again, more intensely than I had the first time, why the glass and the screen were open. The man's voice cut into my thoughts. "Okay, he is ready." The man was standing next to my chair, one hand tightly gripping the boy's shoulder. A thought came to me then that if I were to yank that hat and sunglasses off his face, the man would fall apart like that girl with the ribbon on her neck. The idea scared me. As I moved towards my chair, the man slinked behind it, holding the back of the seat. Looking at the both of them was starting to make me sick. One time I saw a patient brought in who'd clipped his knee against a rock while cliff diving, twisting his lower leg so badly his foot was facing backward. The wrongness of looking at that was what I felt while looking at the father and his son. I sat in the chair and just focused on the boy, hearing the man breathing heavily behind me. I drew a fresh needle for Louis and reached for him before my eyes widened. There, running up and down his arm, were thick blue veins. I gripped his elbow and could feel them pumping beneath the skin. They were undoubtedly there. I could hear the man's breath quickening, almost with excitement. I didn't know what to say. I wiped the area in the crook of the boy's arm and prepared the needle. Louis's skin felt moist, even through my gloves. I saw his face and neck, too, had droplets of perspiration. His skin was almost sticky now. "I'm scared," Louis's voice came out like the croak of a frog. His big, watery eyes met mine. Some of his hair was clinging to his forehead from the sweat. I stopped moving the needle towards his arm and leaned forward. "Louis, are you okay? Is something going on?" is what I responded. I could feel the man leaning over me. The boy nodded yes. "I'm scared of the pain from the needle. It won't hurt any more than last time. Louis, it's okay." I think that's how I reassured him. But I myself was confused. After that, Louis turned to look back towards the ceiling, his face going back to the stern grimace it had the entire time. I'd never seen such an inhuman reaction before. I didn't know what to do but proceed with drawing the blood. I aimed the needle right towards the bright, obvious veins and dug it into his arm. I felt the pop of the vein almost instantly. I closed my eyes for a moment as the blood flowed from the needle into the first vial on the small table. I vividly imagined 20 minutes from now, when I was back down the hall, recanting what an odd experience my last draw was, and someone would commiserate with me that the graveyard shifts were always a mental strain. That's where I wanted to be. I opened my eyes and let out a gasp that barely avoided being a scream. What I saw was that the blood sliding from the needle, up the tubes, filling the first vial was a deep blue, the same color as the boy's veins. It looked like thick blue paint. I likely would have fallen backward out of my seat if it didn't mean I'd fall into the man behind me, and the idea of touching him was worse than anything. "What's wrong now?" The man's was leaning down behind me, not far from my ear. His voice sounded harsher now than when he last asked this. Nothing I remember stuttering out. I stopped the draw as it filled the first vial, sliding the needle out and wrapping gauze around the puncture point that began to stain blue. I knew I needed to get out of there. I picked up the vial and could hear the man moving behind me. The boy held his same zombie-like stare at the ceiling. As I stood up, the man was in front of me, between my path to the door. One of his hands was extended out to me. He was grinning, and I looked away from his teeth. I've replayed this interaction a lot of times in my head. "Please," I said then. I don't know exactly why. Everything's normal with the boy now. "Yes," I sputtered out. I felt like I could hear movement from outside the window. Excited movement. Please," the man replied, grinning wider. I held out a vial, placing it into his palm, from which the skin seemed to sag, and he moved out of my way. I almost ran towards the door, pulling it open as I felt tears begin to well in my eyes, and then slamming it behind me. My leaving, as well, was captured on the camera, and that was that. I told the CNO and whoever was there at the time, nearly hysterical, that there was something horribly wrong in the room at the end of the hall, but it was empty once they'd reached it. I don't know exactly why any of it happened. I know people in here are probably more willing than most circles of the internet to believe this kind of crazy stuff. If anyone has any ideas, I'm open to hearing them. I haven't come up with any medical or logical prognosis. The last thing I should say is that since then, if I'm ever unfortunate enough to get the graveyard shift, I'm very careful. I make sure to lock all the windows before it gets dark, because I sometimes hear the ones in the empty rooms rattling from the outside.